Rudy Giuliani's lobbying campaign in Ukraine included several conversations with the country's former prosecutor, who was tasked with investigating the allegations against the Bidens, including the suggestion that the two countries establish a joint commission to investigate. This, according to new reporting from NBC's chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel, who spoke with former prosecutor Yuri Lushenko earlier today. And we should note that Lushenko was hired by the previous government in Ukraine, has no legal training, and is featured prominently in the whistleblower's complaint for a series of public accusations about the Biden family, many of which he later had to walk back. He now says he is unaware of any violation of Ukrainian law, at least by either Biden.
How many times did you speak with, in person or over the phone, with Rudy Giuliani or his associates? Dozens of times?
I don't remember. I had, I think, some 50, 60 phones per day during 3.5 years in General Prosecutor Office. With Mr. Giuliani, I have met twicely, and twicely I spoke about. Now we are speaking.
Those were physical meetings. What about communications, emails?
I think
frequent?
I think that it is not a public question about my phones that not connected with Ukrainians' cases.
No, I'm talking about the, and I'm not asking for the records. I'm just saying, were you in regular contact with him?
No, it was there were irregular contacts, but yes, I have spoken with him maybe 10 times.
10 times?
Maybe.
Always about this issue?
This and another even political issues.
NBC's chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel in Kiev, and Ambassador Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia and an MSNBC international affairs analyst, joining us as well. Richard, it's pretty extraordinary, though, because central to the whistleblower's complaint is the role of Rudy Giuliani. No matter what he was doing, why was the president's private lawyer working for the State Department, working in coordination, meetings that were arranged for him by this envoy, the special envoy for Ukraine, for the State Department? Why was that at all appropriate? And also, the president, in his phone call with Zelensky, the new president of Ukraine, he brings up the whole issue. The president brings up the whole issue of investigating the Clinton emails. He's also looking at that, as was Giuliani in a number of his comments.
So we had to drag it out of the former prosecutor who just left his position about 1 month ago, but he did confirm that he was in fairly regular contact with the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. And I went and spent quite a bit of time with the former prosecutor and asked him, well, what were you talking about? What was the subject of these meetings and these phone calls? And a lot of it was about the Bidens. It was about specifically Hunter Biden when he worked for a Ukrainian energy company called Burisma. And the Rudy Giuliani wanted to know more, wanted to know if there were improprieties, wanted to know if there were conflicts of interest, was really trying to dig up information about Hunter Biden's time as a consultant for this energy company. And the former prosecutor said that he was happy to cooperate, that he would provide whatever information the United States wanted. And you have to look at the larger context here. You're talking about a former prosecutor in a country that is at war with Russia right now. And the former prosecutor was proudly saying how his own son has fought in the Eastern Front against the Russians. It is the subject that is on everyone's mind right here. Part of the country is occupied by Russian militias. So President Trump withholds about $400 million of military aid to Ukraine, and military aid that this country desperately needs. Otherwise, it could lose even more territory. And while that aid is being withheld, Rudy Giuliani is here talking to the former prosecutor. Actually, he was then he was then the active prosecutor, asking information about the Bidens, asking information about Hunter Biden's time as a paid consultant for this energy firm. So it is not at all surprising that this official said, hey, we'll do whatever you want. You want information? We are happy to provide it to you. We are happy to allow the Americans to investigate it. He said that they investigated already in this country, didn't find any specific violations of Ukrainian law. But he said if the Americans want to investigate it, go for it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.